Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. As mentioned before, in the Gospel of Mark, we find that Jesus is making his way to Jerusalem. And we're at that point in the Gospel of Mark where he's turning his face to Jerusalem and going to go there to ultimately die on the cross. And he's at the point of no return. Each step he takes, every moment that passes, brings him closer and closer to the cross. And so, with that being true, these last minute, if you could call them that, stories and teachings and lessons that we have that start at the end of chapter 9 that run through chapter 10 are lessons that Jesus would have wanted to leave his disciples before him being crucified. And that's a big deal. Think about what a big deal that was. He has a limited amount of time with his disciples. What are the things that he's going to focus on? What are the things that he considers as key things they need to recognize and understand? Well, as you go through these different stories and teachings, basically find three things that run like thread through these different things. You find the idea of humility, service, and sacrifice. Humility, service, and sacrifice. These are things that the disciples really needed to have impressed on their mind before Jesus ends up dying on the cross. For one, by understanding the importance of humility, service, and sacrifice, they would better understand what it was that Jesus was all about and why it was that he was going to the cross. He had humbled himself in becoming a man. Philippians chapter 2 teaches us. He even humbled himself to the point of the death on the cross, it would continue to say there. And so he humbled himself, and that would have been part of him going to the cross, is him humbling himself and being obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. The other thing would be service. Even in our text, we have that key verse in the Gospel of Mark that he didn't come to be served, but to serve. And certainly that runs all the way through the Gospel of Mark, but he really wants them to hone in on that idea that, hey, you guys, the kingdom is not going to be like the other kingdoms of the earth. It's not about being served, it's about you going out and serving others. And that's what Jesus did. In his ministry, he exemplified it, he taught it. It was something that the disciples would need to learn. As they go out into the world preaching the gospel, they would do it not by having everyone bow down to them and become subservient to them in that sense, but by going out and serving others and doing what is best for them. And then sacrifice. And that was one of the ultimate goals of him going to Jerusalem, was to be the sacrifice for sin. And kind of goes without saying, we all are familiar with Jesus dying on the cross, becoming the sacrifice for sin, the means by which we have reconciliation with God. But the disciples need to understand that if they're going to follow Christ, they too would have to live a life of sacrifice. And that theme comes out in these passages as well. For example, with the rich young ruler. He kept a lot of the commandments, not to steal, not to commit adultery, and all those other things, but he ain't quite grasped the idea of sacrifice yet. And that was something that he needed to learn, the disciples needed to learn as well. So that's what they needed to learn. Now, as we think about this in connection to ourselves, these are things we need to learn too. If Jesus thought these were the things that he needed to hone in on and focus on with his disciples before his death, it must mean that these things are pretty important to him. And so as we think about our own lives, it ought to be that we think in terms of these three things. Am I living a life of humility, of being humble before other people? That is a big thing. One of the sins that are on the top of the list in the book of Proverbs that the Lord hates is haughty eyes. That is, someone who's prideful, who looks down their noses at other people. We got to be humble if we're going to follow the example of our King. He expects us to be humble. The whole system of salvation and process of salvation, all of that basically promotes humility. I have to admit that I'm a sinner, that I don't have it all together, and then come to Him seeking the gift that I cannot earn myself. Humility. But then also service, going out and serving others. Matthew 25 goes into that in much detail, going out and clothing the naked, feeding the hungry, visiting the sick, that sort of thing. Being all about helping other people, brightening other people's life a little bit, brightening their day so that they can have a better existence. Service. But then also sacrifice, taking up our cross and following after Christ. Following Him no matter what cost comes along with that. No matter what we're called to do. To be willing to sacrifice for Him as He sacrificed for us. That's a big part of discipleship and something that we should take to heart. So as we do our reading today, as you do your reading today, kind of try to pick out these themes and these different stories and teachings by Christ. And see if you can't connect the dots there. And see if you too can see that, these are the three main things that Christ is asking of His disciples and of us. Humility, service, and sacrifice. And then, let's not just find it in the Word, but then also put it into practice. Live a life of humility, a life of serving others, and also a life of sacrifice. If we can do that, I think we'll be well on our way to living a life pleasing to the Lord. So with that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.